what we're trying to move away from, and that is something like, we're going to do that? Can you switch that slide for me? There we go. If any of you are familiar with the Chinese system, they have something called the Gaokao. The Gaokao is the exam that is given one day a year to many Chinese students who are approximately 17 years old, which determines their life future. Last year, 9.4 million Chinese students took this exam on one day. And it determines their future. And it's a big media event. Shops close down. Everything closes down. They have parades. I mean, it is a big deal. So, actually, when I was looking at this slide just a couple of nights ago, getting ready, I circled this in red because there's one empty desk there, and I'm thinking, whatever happened to that poor soul? Her life is over. I had no idea. But one empty chair there. I don't know what that's about. So we kind of, we don't have this system, obviously, and actually I think sometimes we're a little bit smug about this. Well, we don't do that. We would not herd people and put 9.4 million people into one testing room or nationwide. We don't do that. So we're trying to move away from that. Next slide, please. This is not working for me. There we go. So that's not working. Some other things aren't working that I think you should be aware of. We have really no more means to control kids very well. Just with the nature of our society, we really don't have a mechanism for saying, do this and expect them to obey. We are not in an obedience culture anymore. We are in a please do this, can I help you do it? How do I assist you in doing it? So we lack means of control. Next slide, please. That doesn't mean we're still not trying to do it. This is an interesting slide. 100 years difference, and exactly what is the difference? None. And by the way, that's not on the kids, that's on us. And why haven't we done something more about that? We better, because things are moving on. Next slide, please. We're also training teachers the same way. I don't know if exactly that's a picture of teacher training, but I'll tell you that's an expression that a lot of teachers have on top there when they receive professional development. Oh my God, another one. And if you're an educator, you know that professional development, professional learning is not highly regarded. So we got to figure out how to way to train teachers. We're not doing really. Now that's changing. Professional learning is getting better. So I'm not talking in absolutes here. But you should be aware, as an ILEAD board member, as a representative, you know, we got room to grow here in terms of how we train our staff, because the skill set that is required to work in the new environment versus the old environment is completely different. And ILEAD knows this very well, because you are trying to train teachers who are facilitators, and good for you, you call them facilitators. But if we actually drill down into the word facilitator, what does that mean? Part teacher, part therapist. I use the word designer because when you put a project together, you're actually not doing lesson planning anymore. You're doing a design of a learning experience. That's a different concept. So all that is part of the ILEAD training. And it's not easy to get. And schools of education are giving us exactly zero help on this, because they are not training people to be facilitators. They might mention it in a course, they might talk about it, but the bulk of what a teacher trainee gets is class management. How do you manage the herd, and how do you keep the herd of cats going in one direction, and what can we do to keep these kids somewhat controlled? Next slide, please. Now, have we given it up entirely? We have not, and I think this is an important sort of discussion to have. We still retain in our system. We had this, I'm looking right here at Laura, we had this discussion last night at dinner about John Muir Middle School, right? That's what this John Muir Middle School is doing. I love this slide. The voice of central control. John probably knows this one as being an ex-principal. You come over the loudspeaker and say, so-and-so, please come to the office. We'll be shortening the period because of this. Constant interruptions, and it always happens if you're a teacher, just as you're about to say something important, the loudspeaker comes on. Over there in the corner, that's the punishment. That's where the kid who acted out is sent to the corner of the room. I love the seat of authority, the teacher desk in front, and the marked secrecy behind the podium there. We don't exactly know what the teacher is thinking. physical control, control of information, etc. So we got a lot of control going in our classrooms. We're trying to move away from all of this, and ILEAD is an outstanding example of how we're trying to do this in a very positive way. Next slide, please. What we're really teaching, and this is the term I use, this might not be what Amber and Dawn would use. I think we're trying to teach attitude these days. Really attitude. And attitude, I mean in a broad way. What is your relationship to life? How open are you to possibility? How open are you to your own challenges, your own strengths, your own areas to grow? And I think what ILEAD does, and if I was a board member, I'd be thinking about ILEAD as a system that creates kids with a great attitude. Now, I don't know if you've seen this slide. This is a fun one that somebody showed me one time. Somebody decided that if they take the 26 letters of the alphabet, they give them a number, and then they add up the numbers, they discovered that knowledge only equals 96%, hard work equals 98%, and attitude equals 100%. Now, how this is done, I have no idea. I don't know whether this is one of the mysterious ways in which the universe communicates with us. I don't know, but it all works out. So attitude is really something that I think ILEAD produces. And all those statistics that Linda showed you just now are really the result of an attitude of hard work, an attitude of openness, an attitude of engagement, an attitude of passion and purpose, an attitude of, I really can do this, I want to do this, I am engaged with life. So I love that about what we're doing, what ILEAD is doing. Next slide, please. Now, attitude isn't everything, and so if somebody is saying to you, well, that's great, I love what ILEAD does, what you're telling me. They create kids with good attitude. Did they learn anything? Yes, they are learning a lot of things. And what we're moving towards is a slightly, or I should say more than slightly, a much different view of what it means to learn deeply these days. So you're familiar with the old model, master the test, get the score, that's what learning was. Now we're looking at deeper learning competencies. We're looking at not only mastery of academic content, yes, we're looking at ability to collaborate, communicate. These are core competencies in our world today, simply core competencies. So we're now including that in the whole mindset. Then we have this thing called think critically, solve complex problems. I'm going to have a couple things to say about that in a minute because I don't think that quite captures what we're about these days, but we are trying to get kids to think. And then academic mindsets, learn how to learn. That's basically how do I become a lifelong learner, and how am I always open to new information, and how do I meld that desire for new information with actually looking for facts, information, stuff that matters. Now, this is a bit difficult for us these days because we don't really have a good metric for what is core knowledge and what's required these days. Should you read all 12 plays of Shakespeare to be a well-educated high school student? Should you just read Romeo and Juliet? Should you just watch the movie? Honestly, we don't have great answers to that. But what I like is that ILEAD is constantly trying to figure out what is the core information necessary in each project, and how do I blend that with the doing so that results in some action and some sort of public demonstration of accomplishment. I love that about ILEAD. Next slide, please. Now, what I would add to the deeper learning model is this, and it's something that ILEAD has done a terrific job, and that is social emotional learning. Now, I'm going to push back here just a little bit because I think it's an outdated term. And I think it's an outdated term because here's where it came from. Years ago, not so long ago, we had academic learning. I learned how to do calculus. I learned the facts around the Civil War. I learned the photosynthesis cycle. That was my academic learning. Then I mastered that well enough that I was able to get into a college. I did more academic learning. Now, in the process, we began to notice that people got stressed out. They actually didn't have any social life. Their psyche was not really good. So then we invented something called social emotional learning. But really what we're searching for, and I think, again, what ILEAD does an excellent job at, is starting to put that together. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit. So creativity, compassion, courage, character, empathy, resiliency, grit, curiosity, all those things. I feel, are not being taught at ILEAD as an isolated subject. And honestly, we can't teach them as an isolated subject. So the principal can't come over that loudspeaker and say, today I'm going to teach wisdom. Not going to happen. That's a thing that you grow with kids, and I think the ILEAD system is doing a terrific job of helping do that. Let me talk a little bit more about it. Next slide, please. We're really talking, instead of social emotional learning, in my view, about strengths. How do you become a strong, competent individual? A strong, competent individual has those strengths. And that's the way I like to kind of hold it in my mind. Again, that's a little, we haven't really talked deeply about that, but that's how I would hold it. We're talking about strengths-based. I have a background in psychology. I'm a big believer in human potential. I'm a big believer in a strengths-based positive psychology approach to life. How do we get better at things? So that's, to me, what ILEAD is doing a great job, and a lot of this is this iceberg that we're teaching to these days. It's not easy to teach to the iceberg, but that's what we're doing. I don't know if you're familiar with the iceberg model, but you can see what people do, but underneath that there's a whole invisible process that's going on. ILEAD does an excellent job in terms of the system and the projects and sort of tapping into that interior of kids. I love that about what's going on. Not everybody's doing that. Next slide, please. ILEAD, as you heard last night at the fireside chat, I didn't see any fire, but there was a fireside chat, and you talked about how social emotional learning, what you wanted to bring to it, and project-based learning, high-tech high, deciding to embark on that journey. So a lot of people are taking the plunge on project-based learning. This is another thing that will come up in terms of your conversations with your friends, your neighbors, your associates, your spouse. Well, I heard a lot of people are doing project-based learning. Yes, they are. But, next slide, please. They are doing it in different forms, and I think that's a key factor for you to understand and be able to talk about. There are flavors of PBL, and a lot of those flavors, which I call vanilla, are really not that great, because of what a lot of teachers are doing around the country is they're saying, I'm doing project-based learning, but secretly they're trying to use projects to manipulate kids into learning what they think they should learn. Or they're doing projects in 2 hours. Now, this guy who wrote this book on the left here, Hacking PBL, he'd be furious if we know I had this up here, but I don't care, because you can't do project-based learning in 2 hours. If you like the slow food movement, you'll like PBL, because this is slow learning. It takes time to think, delve, investigate, come up with an idea, fail at it, get some feedback, go through this process. So one of the strengths of ILEAD, the PBL, you give it time for it to happen, and I think that's so critical. So when people said, oh, they're doing PBL they're doing PBL at John Muir, they're not doing the same kind that ILEAD is doing. This is deeper learning PBL, and I think you guys should be very proud that that's happening. It's great, because you are a model for that. All right, next slide. I just want you to be aware of how a project kind of rolls out and what's involved, because I don't think that's something that you necessarily see. Even if you tour a classroom, you can't really see what's going on. What I call the Neapolitan version, the richer version, the more diverse version, really involves a design process. And in that design process, it begins with, what's the reason we're doing this project? What's the why? What's the challenge? Why are we spending 4 weeks on this project? Why are kids investing their time? And why am I, as a teacher, investing my time? And I will tell you that over the last 5 days, that is the chief conversation that I have with teachers. Stepping back, taking a big breath, getting some perspective, and think, what's the why? What's the challenge? What is going to not just grab these kids, that's not the right metaphor. What is going to help awaken them? What is going to pull them forward? What are they going to grab onto if you give this idea? And how are you going to work with them as you move forward on that? So once you get that challenge, it's very critical that you move into a really good driving question. And a driving question is a problem to be solved. Again, big topic of conversation this week, to get the teachers to really understand it's not a thematic question, it's a problem to be solved. Now, why is that important? because if we're going to really kind of like move deep into kids or deep into human beings, period, what does it is challenge. Challenge brings up whatever that mysterious stuff inside us that is empathy or curiosity. Nobody knows where it comes from. It's one of life's mysteries. But we do know that challenge brings it out. And so those projects, the more challenging they are, and I mean challenging in a good way, where you're interested, you're engaged, you think, I got to do this, where you want to get up in the morning as a student and come and get on it. That's the kind of challenge that brings up the social emotional piece, the strengths piece, along with the learning piece. So the challenge is important. Then think about, okay, what would I do at the end? What would I give? What would I show? That's the POL part. How would I actually present this information? One of the big things we've learned in project-based learning, which ILEAD does an excellent job is that we need to get past what we call the handed in, handed back culture. Hand me a piece of work, I'll put some red marks on it, I'll give it back to you. That is low level. The POLs are designed to put a young person in front of adults because that raises their blood pressure just enough that they don't pass out, but they do very well and rise to the occasion. This is about challenge. Challenge really works. Then, as you move through, having kids work through design, thinking about the problem they're solving, whether it's a thing they're building in a STEM course or whether it's an idea they're working with, it doesn't really matter. Or even if it's an imagined animal that second graders are making up in a habitat project. It goes through a design process and a way for kids and teachers to talk with each other about the quality of work they're doing. That's where the slow learning comes in. Design and solve, this last piece, always ending with mastery, what I call it. So if kids are doing a POL and they're standing up in front of an adult audience, parents or otherwise, you don't want them to stand like this. You want them to be up, competent, telling their message. So working on presentation skills, working with presentation rubrics, critical. So a great project has all these elements. And they all hang together. And there's no one magic bullet. Just doing one piece of it is not going to make it a great project. But if you get the pieces right, if you put this puzzle together right, if you design it that way, then the result is what you've seen at ILEAD, where kids are doing phenomenal work, but also showing themselves in phenomenal ways, where you just sense their brightness. I actually consider the outcome of PBL, bottom line, what I call brightness. They hold themselves differently. They look more mature. PBL actually has the ability in an engaging project to help kids mature in a period of 3 to 5 weeks. And you can see it, and parents can see it. And when they see that, they go, this works. It really is powerful. So that's what's happening here. That's the cycle. Next slide, please. And one of the things that I want to point out, I sort of talked about this in August a little bit when I was here, standing right here. What ILEAD does so well is fold in the whole social emotional strengths piece right into the process of learning. That to me is your competitive edge. Something that you're doing that a lot of schools are not doing, and something you can talk about. So at the challenge, that's about curiosity. You can just look through this yourself and see the whole design cycle invokes these strengths. And if the design cycle is done right, suddenly you have a system of learning and teaching in which you're not doing academic learning versus social emotional learning. You've got it all together in one sort of nice, coherent, seamless whole when it works well. And that is a beautiful model, and that is the model of the future in my estimation. So that's why I think you guys are developing prototypes that are going to be very, very helpful as educators begin to build out these models. There's going to be a lot of people more traipsing into these doors saying, just exactly how do you do that? Because that classroom of control with a loudspeaker and the desks in a row is under assault, and it is going to end sooner than we think, at least in my estimation. It's going to be like the Berlin Wall. One day it's going to be here, and the next day it's not. And people are going to go, what happened? I thought we had this system where, no. It's an empty system. It's a hollow system. It's not doing the job that we need it to do. Next slide, please. So, what are you doing? I think at ILEAD, as board members, as advisors, as representatives, you are helping build the future of learning. It's a magnificent task. You should be very pleased with it. Here's my little elevator speech that might kind of like go along with this. So next slide, please. What does ILEAD do well? Caring relationships. Number one, I can't tell you this week how many times I don't want to say impressed. Let's see if I can find the right word. Well, I'll say it this way. Here I am. I'm sitting in these rooms. So teachers are coming to see me this week, right? They just kind of one after another. And they come in and they got tats. They got purple hair. They got spiked hair. They got every ethnic. I mean, I'm looking at this group come in and I'm saying, well, what's next? And you know what holds them all together? Care. Care. All of them are caring, beautiful souls who are committed to doing their job. Do they always know how to do PBL? Absolutely right? No. Do they care? Yes. And everything starts with care because relationships are what drive learning these days. Go back to that slide. We can't whip them anymore. That was never a very good idea in the first place. You work with them, and how you work with people is you establish that channel of trust, communication, and care. Because once kids get that they have you on their side, they work. They want to work. So that's really powerful and important. How are we doing? 12:10. Thank you. I'm a little concerned about time because I have to get on a flight because my wife has a birthday tonight, and if I miss that birthday, I will not be back here. I will believe me. That'll be it for me. So anyway, culture of care, number one thing for me that I would say about ILEAD, culture of care. All right, next slide, please. I love this fact that you have really focused on learners and facilitation and tried to language that. And that's a real advance, the language of facilitation, moving from the sage on the stage to actually being a guide. Now, I will say to you, this is actually not something we're drilling down into deeply enough, except at places like ILEAD. Across the country, they're saying, oh, you're now a guide on the side. You're no longer lord of the board. You're now a facilitator. They're not giving you any kind of hint as to actually how they do that, nor are they hiring for that, nor are they helping you develop that, your own SEL skill set so that you can do that effectively. Here they are. Big advance, great thing to tell friends and neighbors. Next slide, please. This is something that is my view. I don't know, I've never really talked to Don and Amber about this, but I do not believe in the cognitive model of human beings. I do not believe that we operate by the brain alone. I do not believe the cognitive psychologists. I simply don't believe them. I think they're operating off this notion that developed in the 1950s and 60s. We had come in the computer age, and they figured, well, if we got computers, maybe people operate like computers. I don't think they do. I do a lot of work, as Don and Amber know, with the heart, and I will tell you that there is absolute slam dunk scientific validity to the fact that the heart and brain are completely connected. Just give you a real quick 10-second science lesson. There's one very large nerve that runs from the back of the brain to the heart, called the vagus nerve. It's a big nerve. 80% of the nerve traffic that operates on that pathway goes from heart to brain, not the reverse, raising questions about who's in charge. I don't think it's the brain. No, that's not an explicit part of exactly what you do here, but you are a heart-focused organization, and the heart matters at ILEAD and is going to result in better learning. And that's, I think, one reason that you're being successful. The heart matters in this organization. And at some point in the future, hopefully not too long, we are going to recognize the science of the heart and incorporate that into how we think about teaching, learning, and human development. We're a little bit far apart on that, but that'll happen. Next slide, please. I like this fact that everything begins here with the child at ILEAD. Now, not the content is the child. This is why you've been scrambling for 10 years to get your test scores up. And fine, that's the way it is. You're scrambling, you're doing a good job, by the way. I saw a lot of growth on this in the last 5 days. But you start in the right place because tests are secondary to the development of young people. They simply are. And I know We had this conversation again last night about your child. Good for you for putting it in the right perspective, and I'm sorry you have to fight this rearguard battle all the time, but you do. And you know, you understand the mechanics of that. I do too. But it won't always be that way. By the way, that's a little, I don't know that little graphic, you can't see very well, but I'll tell you what it is. In 1890, they decided what the curriculum was going to be for the 20th century. This was called the Committee of 10. It was at Harvard. 10 old white men. I can say that because I'm old white man, so I can like. And they decided this is what we're going to learn. And the only thing that's changed on there is we call it English language arts instead of grammar. Other than that, it's completely the same. That is not a good commentary on the imaginative capabilities of the human race. We can do better, and we're working on doing better. So that's it. Next slide, please. And I love the fact, I've sort of alluded to this already, ILEAD is a strengths-based model, 7 habits, whatever other else you do. It's a strengths-based model, very similar to the kind of strengths-based models that they're trying to develop in industry. So you are mirroring how people really are trained out in the broader world these days. And so I love that as well. So that's another little piece of the elevator speech. All righty, move on, please. And the challenging model of project-based learning, I think that's sort of the key point. When people ask you what they're doing, they not only do PBL, they're doing PBL at a deep level in a way that challenges young people to step up, perform, get engaged, find their passion, develop their purpose, and really exit the system ready for whatever. And we all know there's a lot of whatevers coming on the horizon, so we got to get that straight. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to have a chance to go through this. I think we're going to probably come about time, yeah. But I do want to indicate, just kind of look over some of those questions. These are the kinds of questions that kids were dealing with, or the teachers were dealing this week. The kinds of deep problems that are being presented to kids to work with. Wonderful driving questions. And you just look at a couple of them. How can I write a poem that inspires myself to be more resilient? That's a problem. That's a problem to be solved. Creating games, simple machines. I love this one on the California Spanish missions. Somebody said, when I'm dealing with a teacher, she said, you know, I heard that life in the missions wasn't really very good. Oh, maybe we ought to have a project about that. So we develop a time traveler project where they go back and, as committed to social justice, we're going to improve conditions, and particularly focusing in the San Fernando mission. And by the way, that's another AV. Where's my AV? Another AV.
The kid at Michael's and building one isn't the thing anymore?
Yeah, we gave up the Sugar Cube mission. But boy, I tell you, I'm good at that. I built one. I know how to do it.
I built 3.
All right, let me finish up here. If you give me the last slide there. So those are the kinds of driving questions. This is what I'm going to share with Angie. You've got to teach the kids how to do that. I'm going to send you this slide, Angie. This is sort of my add-on here. You have to show the kids how to get into these problems, and that's where facilitation comes. You can't just lay the problems on kids. You have to have a pretty deep discussion about that. All right, here we go. Moving on, please. And just finally, somebody said, if you tell them all that I just told you, they're going to go like, wow, it must be just paradise at ILEAD. No, it's not paradise. So next slide, please. What are we still looking at? What's still to come? Better build out a design thinking. Design thinking, human-centered design is really the wave of the future. That's what I think is going to replace critical thinking. We're not going to focus on one problem. We're going to focus on design. That is coming in ILEAD. Some teachers talking about it, some not. I'm sure it's on your mind and how to build that out. The coaching is a constant issue to show people and help them become better coaches and facilitators. And how do you really develop really those exquisite sensitive skills that allow you to tune in to children? That is not easy to do. More and more personalization, that's the cookie cutter piece. Our world is moving towards personalized learning. Now, how that's all going to play out for PBL, I'm not sure, but we got so many different ways that somebody's going to come up with an answer, because you got 20 different ways that people are doing education in ILEAD. So that's really in a good position to figure that out. That's going to be good. I don't think we've even begun to tap how kids can collaborate and develop things together. That's really a deeper conversation that's playing out. I put something over there that I'm interested in, Z-School. I'm involved in a nonprofit to offer online courses in design thinking, social entrepreneurship, and project-based inquiry to anybody in the world who wants it, who's between 11 and 19, and they enter a global design challenge solving local issues. Global is the next step for PBL, And finally, if you're not aware of the ramifications of artificial intelligence, you better get there, because here's what I just read 2 days ago. In 10 years, 30% of jobs in Germany and the US are going to disappear. That's a huge hit. And we got a real question about how do we prepare our generation, next generation, to deal with this. What makes them better than machines? Machines don't fail. Machines have perfect memories. Machines can do a lot of stuff. What differentiates us from machines? And frankly, I think some question is, how do we avoid becoming techno-slaves? Kind of big issues for us on the horizon. So last slide. So that's it. Anyway, that's a quick hit. That'll get off to lunch.